A wife slept with her husband's brother on her wedding day in a drunken moment. A year later, her whole world comes crashing down. The soft chime of champagne glasses and the hum of laughter filled the grand reception hall. Fairy lights draped across the ceiling like constellations, and the smell of vanilla and roses wafted through the air. It was supposed to be the happiest night of Rachel's life. She had just married James, the man she had been with for the past 4 years, the man who adored her, the man who would give her the stable, loving future she had always dreamed of. But as she sat at the head table, surrounded by guests and well-wishers, Rachel couldn't shake the unease creeping through her. Her heart pounded louder than the music, and her hands were clammy despite the cool evening air. Was it nerves? Anxiety over the start of her new life? Or was it the fact that James' brother, Liam, was sitting just a few feet away? She had always been drawn to Liam in ways she knew were inappropriate. He was James' polar opposite, reckless, charismatic, and untamed. While James was the responsible older brother who had built his life on security and structure, Liam had always walked on the edge of chaos. And for reasons Rachel couldn't admit even to herself, that had always fascinated her. Their interactions had always been flirtatious, but harmless. At least, that's what she told herself. But as the night dragged on, with James being pulled away by guests and family members, Rachel found herself drinking more than she should. And Liam was there, always close, always watching. "You okay?" he asked, slipping into the empty seat beside her. Rachel looked at him, her vision slightly hazy. His tie was loosened, his shirt slightly undone at the top. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by something else. Concern? No. Something darker. "I'm fine," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the music. "You don't look fine." Before she could respond, someone called for a toast, and the guest's attention shifted elsewhere. Liam leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Come with me," he whispered. Rachel should have said no. She should have pushed him away, laughed it off, gone back to her husband. But she didn't. She followed Liam into a quiet room away from the crowd, and ended up sleeping with each other before returning like nothing had happened. That was the night her entire life changed. Rachel spent the following weeks drowning in guilt. She convinced herself it was a one-time mistake, something she would take to the grave. James never suspected a thing. Why would he? He loved her. Then she found out she was pregnant. Her hands shook as she held the pregnancy test, staring at the 2 lines that sealed her fate. It has to be James's, she told herself. But deep down, she knew there was a chance, no, a likelihood, that it wasn't. Panic set in. She couldn't lose everything over one mistake. So she did the only thing she could. She lied. When she told James she was pregnant, his reaction was everything she had hoped for. He was ecstatic, lifting her off the ground, spinning her in circles, pressing kisses to her forehead. "This is the best news ever," he whispered against her hair. "I can't wait to be a dad." Rachel forced a smile, burying the guilt deep inside her. She would never tell him. A year passed, and on the surface, everything seemed perfect. They had their beautiful baby boy, Nathan, and James had stepped into fatherhood effortlessly. Rachel did everything she could to maintain the illusion of their happy life, throwing herself into the role of a devoted wife and mother. But Liam knew. He never said it outright, but Rachel could see it in the way he looked at Nathan, the way his face would darken slightly whenever James gushed about his mini-me. And then there were the little comments. "Funny how genetics work," Liam had said once, watching Nathan play on the floor. "Sometimes kids end up looking nothing like their dad." Rachel had nearly dropped the glass she was holding. "Why would you say that?" she had snapped. Liam had just shrugged. "Just an observation." The tension between them grew with each passing month, and Rachel knew it was only a matter of time before something cracked. She just never expected it to be James. James had always trusted Rachel. He had never been the jealous type, never felt the need to snoop through her things. But one evening, while looking for an old work document on his phone, he stumbled across a folder of archived text messages. Curious, he opened it. And his world shattered. The messages weren't detailed, but they didn't need to be. The timestamps told him everything. Texts between Rachel and Liam on their wedding night, cryptic enough to raise alarm bells. James scrolled further, his heart pounding. "We can't ever speak of this again. It was a mistake. He can't ever know." His vision blurred as rage consumed him. The woman he had given his life to. The woman he had trusted with everything. She had betrayed him in the worst way possible. And the worst part. The child he had spent the last year loving as his own might not even be his. James sat in silence for what felt like hours, staring at the damning text messages. His mind was racing, his body frozen. He wanted to believe there was some kind of mistake, that this wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, he knew the truth. The rage that built inside him was like nothing he had ever felt before. His hands trembled as he gripped his phone. His entire marriage, his family, was built on a lie. He had to confront her. Rachel was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cleaned up after dinner. Nathan was in his high chair, happily babbling away. James walked in, his face unreadable. "We need to talk." Rachel turned, smiling. "What's up, babe?" He placed his phone on the counter and opened the folder of messages. "Explain this." Her smile vanished in an instant. Her eyes flickered to the screen, and all the color drained from her face. I don't know what." "Don't lie to me." His voice was low, controlled, but the fury beneath it was unmistakable. "Tell me the truth, Rachel. Did you sleep with my brother?" Rachel's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked like a trapped animal, scanning the room for an escape. I was drunk," she finally choked out. "It was a mistake, James. I never meant for it to happen." James let out a hollow laugh. "A mistake? You married me and then slept with my brother on the same night. And you never meant for it to happen." He took a step closer, his fists clenched. "Tell me the truth. Is Nathan even mine?" Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. "Of course he is. James, please, I want a paternity test." Her breath hitched. "What?" "You heard me." His voice was like ice. "We're getting a DNA test. Right now." The next morning, James didn't waste any time. He scheduled a rush paternity test and took Nathan to the clinic himself. Rachel protested, begged, swore that it wasn't necessary. But James wasn't hearing any of it. He couldn't. He spent the next few days in agony, waiting for the results. He barely spoke to Rachel, barely slept. He kept replaying every moment of their relationship, every kiss, every touch, every time she told him she loved him. Was any of it real? Then, the email arrived. James took a deep breath before opening it. Probability of paternity, 0%. The world around him blurred. Nathan wasn't his son. The betrayal was complete. Rachel sobbed when James handed her the divorce papers. "James, please, don't do this. I love you. We can get past this." "No," he cut her off. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to destroy my life and then tell me we can get past it." "But Nathan." James swallowed hard. His heart ached when he looked at the little boy, the child he had raised, loved, and believed was his own. But he wasn't. Rachel had stolen that from him. "I will always love him," James said quietly. "But he's not my son." He turned back to Rachel, his expression cold. "And you're dead to me." Rachel collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. But James felt nothing. The love he once had for her was gone. Now, all he wanted was revenge. James wasn't just going to walk away quietly. Rachel had shattered his life, he was going to return the favor. He gathered every piece of evidence, the text messages, the paternity results, everything. Then, he made sure the truth spread. Rachel's family was devastated. Her parents, who had adored James, were disgusted. Her friends turned on her. And Liam? He wasn't spared either. James confronted him at their parents' house, in front of the whole family. "You slept with my wife on my wedding night," James spat. "You destroyed my marriage, my family. How does it feel, knowing you're nothing but a backstabbing piece of trash?" Liam had no defense. Their parents were horrified. Their father, red-faced with rage, told Liam to get out. Rachel and Liam had destroyed everything. And James had made sure everyone knew. Rachel had always been good at pretending. Pretending to be the perfect wife, the devoted mother, and the innocent victim. But after James exposed the truth, the mask finally slipped, and reality came crashing down. Her reputation was shattered. Friends who once admired her as a loving wife now whispered behind her back. Family members who had supported her wedding now distanced themselves in shame. Even at work, her colleagues treated her differently. The worst part? Liam. At first, Rachel had convinced herself that Liam would stand by her. That their forbidden love would thrive now that the secret was out. But the moment reality set in, the moment the responsibility of raising Nathan as his own dawned on him, Liam's excitement turned into regret. "This isn't what I signed up for," Liam muttered one night as they argued in the apartment they had hastily moved into. "You're his father, Liam. We made this choice together." Rachel yelled, desperate to hold on to the one person she had left. Liam scoffed. "No, you made a choice. I was just a drunken idiot who went along with it. I never wanted to raise a kid with you." The words cut deeper than she expected. She had sacrificed everything for him. Her marriage. Her stability. And now, the one person she thought would stand by her was pulling away. Liam started spending more nights away. At first, he claimed it was for work, then for personal space. Eventually, Rachel found out the truth. Liam had been seeing someone else. The betrayal stung. But it was poetic justice. Meanwhile, James was thriving. After finishing the divorce, he wasted no time rebuilding his life. He moved to a new apartment in the city, far away from the memories of his past. With the financial settlement he secured in the divorce, he took a long overdue vacation, traveling to places he had once only dreamed of. And then there was Olivia. What started as a casual friendship turned into something more. She had been there for him in his darkest moments, offering comfort without expectation. Unlike Rachel, Olivia never manipulated him, never played mind games. She was honest, kind, and exactly what he needed. One evening, as they watched the sunset from a rooftop bar, Olivia turned to him with a gentle smile. "You seem happier," she said. James exhaled, feeling the weight of his past finally lifting. "I am so happy to be here, with you." For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was truly living. Months later, James received a message he never expected, an email from Rachel. "James, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but please, I need to talk to you. I just need someone to listen. I don't know where else to turn." He stared at the message for a long moment before closing it without responding. Rachel was no longer his problem. As he put his phone away, Olivia slid her hand into his. "Everything okay?" James smiled, looking at the woman who had restored his faith in love. "Yeah," he said. "Everything's perfect." And with that, he walked away from his past, never looking back. On to the next story. My husband brought a younger woman into my marriage to satisfy his needs while I looked after our children, so I exposed him for his infidelity, then started a new life with our kids. From the outside, my life looked perfect. The mansion, the designer clothes, the lavish vacations, all the things people assumed made a woman happy. But inside those golden walls, my world was suffocating. I married James Whitmore when I was 24. He was nearly 15 years older, already established in the world of high-end real estate, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that made people listen when he spoke. He wasn't my first love, but he was my greatest security. He promised stability, a beautiful life, and in my naive youth, I believed that would be enough. For a while, it was. We had 2 children, Daniel and Sophie, who quickly became the center of my universe. While James continued growing his empire, I dedicated myself to being a mother, ensuring our children had everything they needed. I told myself that was my role, that this was what I had signed up for. But then, he brought her into our home. It started with small things. Subtle changes in James' routine, the way he spoke to me, the way he looked at me. At first, I dismissed it. He was busy, stressed with work, distracted by another major deal. That's what I told myself, but deep down, I knew better. Then, one night at dinner, he dropped the bombshell like it was just another business proposal. "I've hired someone to help out around the house," he said, cutting into his steak. I frowned. "A nanny? We don't need a nanny. The kids are in school all day, and I've been managing just fine." James took a sip of his wine, his expression unreadable. "She's not a nanny, exactly. More of a companion." I put my fork down. "What does that mean?" He sighed, setting his glass down before meeting my gaze. "Her name is Isabella. She's young, ambitious, and willing to accommodate certain needs that you no longer seem interested in." I felt the room spin. The audacity, the cruelty of it. He was telling me, no, informing me, that he had brought another woman into our marriage as if it were a logical business decision. I should have left that night. I should have packed my things and taken the kids and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I let the shock silence me. I let his manipulation convince me to stay, for the kids, for the stability, for the life I had spent years building. I told myself I could endure it. That I could ignore the woman now living under our roof, entertaining my husband while I played the role of the perfect mother. But that was before I realized just how deep his betrayal ran. Isabella was everything I wasn't, young, carefree, eager to please. She walked around the house like she belonged there, her presence a constant reminder of my husband's ultimate betrayal. At first, James tried to make it seem like nothing had changed. He still kissed me on the cheek before he left for work, still sat beside me at the dinner table. But his nights became longer, his excuses weaker. I heard them sometimes. Late at night, behind closed doors. The first time, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried. The second time, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, anger replacing the heartbreak. I couldn't let this continue. But I needed to be smart. I needed a plan. Over the next few weeks, I started paying close attention. I watched the way Isabella clung to James, how she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, how she placed a hand on his chest when she spoke. I observed how he let her, how he indulged in her adoration like a man who had never been loved before. But the biggest revelation came one afternoon when I overheard their conversation in his office. "I thought you said she wouldn't be a problem," Isabella said, her voice sharp. "She won't," James assured her. "She's too scared to leave. Besides, she has nothing without me."
That was the moment something inside me snapped.
I had been holding on to a marriage that no longer existed, sacrificing my dignity for the sake of a man who saw me as disposable.
I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't let him take everything from me. It was time to fight back.
I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable evidence of James' infidelity and manipulation. For weeks, I quietly documented everything. I recorded conversations, saved text messages, and even managed to install a small camera in his office.
What I found was worse than I had imagined.
James wasn't just cheating, he was planning to take everything from me. He had been consulting lawyers, setting things in motion to ensure that if I ever decided to leave, I would walk away with nothing.
He wanted full custody of our children. He wanted to replace me entirely. But I wouldn't let him.
I took my evidence to the best divorce lawyer in the city, laying everything out on the table. I want full custody, I told her. And I want to make sure he pays for what he's done. She looked over the evidence, her expression grim. With this, we have a strong case. But we need something more, something that will make him unable to fight back.
I knew exactly what that would be.
Isabella had been playing her own game. She wasn't just a pawn in James' scheme, she was a woman with her own ambitions. And she had started to realize that maybe being the other woman wasn't as glamorous as she had imagined. One night, I found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone, her face pale.
He's been lying to me, she whispered.
He told me we had a future, but he's still sleeping with you, isn't he?
I let out a bitter laugh. Of course he is.
Did you really think you were special? Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do.
I placed a hand on her shoulder. Help me bring him down. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. James had always cared about his image more than anything.
He built his empire on respectability, on the illusion of the perfect family man.
So I destroyed that illusion.
With Isabella's help, I leaked everything. His affairs, his financial frauds, his secret plans to cut me out of the picture.
It spread like wildfire.
News articles, social media posts, whispered conversations at business meetings.
His empire crumbled overnight.
When he realized what I had done, he came home in a rage. You think you've won, he spat, his face red with fury. I met his glare with a calmness I hadn't felt in years.
I already have. The divorce was brutal, but I walked away victorious. Full custody. A generous settlement. Enough to start a new life.
James lost everything. His reputation, his wealth, his power.
And I took my children and never looked back. For the first time in years, I was free.
The first morning in our new home was the quietest I had experienced in years. No tense silences, no walking on eggshells around James, no Isabella flitting around the house like a smug specter.
Just me and the kids, wrapped in the warmth of a place that was finally ours. The house wasn't as grand as the mansion we had left behind, but it was ours. A modest, cozy home on the outskirts of the city, far enough from the chaos James had created but close enough to the life I was beginning to rebuild. I sat at the breakfast table with my son, Leo, and my daughter, Sophie, watching them eat their cereal as if nothing had changed. But everything had.
Sophie, only 6, swung her legs beneath the chair, humming as she spooned milk into her mouth. Leo, who was 10 and far more perceptive, watched me carefully.
Are we staying here forever? He asked.
I reached over and ruffled his hair. As long as we want. He nodded, but I could see the gears turning in his head. He had seen too much, heard too much. The day James and I had our final argument, Leo had been hiding at the top of the stairs, listening.
He hadn't cried. He hadn't asked questions. But he knew.
Sophie was too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, but Leo understood in the way children of broken families always do. That morning, I made a silent promise. I would make sure they never felt abandoned, never felt unloved.
It was time to start healing. What did you think of these stories?
Let me know your thoughts about them in the comments, and thanks for listening.